Version 4.1. Initializing upgrades. Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. And today is Wednesday, which means, well, yes, it's the day before Thanksgiving, or what I like to refer to as Turkey Gobble Day. And it's also the Ask Me Anything. That's right, it's the day where you get to ask me questions and I answer them. Sometimes the answer is, that was an interesting question, not providing an answer. But I think all of the questions that came in this week will get an actual answer. Some of them longer answers than others. I'll begin with this question is the type of question that I really enjoy because it requires me to, do some learning. And I love learning stuff. It's one of the reasons that, I enjoy reading news because I learn new information. And I know some people will say, oh, if you read the news, then you're only learning what, they want you to know, whoever they are. And, I don't know why they, them, those, as Ernest Hancock calls them, why they, them, those really want me to know that there was a bus that crashed in Tennessee that killed some children. But that was, one of the stories that I read about a couple days ago. I think it was actually yesterday in yesterday's FPP Radio News, because I saw that and I was like, oh, wow, this is something that I think people want to know about. And yeah, I guess if, you only ever get your news from, say, watching the 5 o'clock or the 6 o'clock news, maybe you're only getting, the hand-picked stories of whatever. I don't know. I could not tell you the last time I watched, say, a 5 o'clock or a 6 o'clock or a 10 o'clock newscast or whatever time the news comes on because, well, I don't own a television. And secondarily, I get my news from so many other sources. And there are times where I'll see stuff floating around on Facebook where people say, nobody's talking about fill-in-the-blank news story. But yet I could then readily point to, here's a bunch of news stories on this topic that you say nobody's talking about. Because some people only get their news from their Facebook feed. Some people only get their news from, their selected sources. And then they say, all of the other sources don't tell you the actual news because, see, here's a story saying that nobody's talking about this thing that people are actually talking about. But I digress. The question is, why are there holes in Swiss cheese? And it's something that I had never really thought about before. I'm sure, as a child, I asked the question and got some kind of weird BS answer. And, well, apparently, this is a fairly common asked thing, and there's some new-ish information on why there are holes in Swiss cheese. I found several articles, and I've chosen one from the BBC. Scientists say they have discovered why Swiss cheese has holes in it. Apparently, it all comes down to dirt. Yep. All comes down to how dirty the milk buckets were when the milk is collected. The article continues, contrary to what cartoons have suggested over the years that the holes are made by mice eating their way through the cheese, and nor are they produced by carbon dioxide released by bacteria, as popular science once believed. Instead, a Swiss laboratory says they are created by flecks of hay. Agroscope, a government agricultural institute, said microscopically small hay particles would fall into the buckets collecting milk and develop into bigger holes as the cheese matures. The process affects only Swiss cheese, such as Emmental and Appenzell. Agroscope said the findings explain why fewer holes have been appearing in Swiss cheese over the last 15 years, since more modern milking methods make it less likely for hay to fall into the containers. Scientists reached their conclusions after adding small amounts of hay dust to milk and making it into cheese over 130 days. That research, and again, this article from May of last year, at the time this article was written, the research had not been peer-reviewed. I'm sure it has been. Since then, I did not delve that deeply. The theory that bacteria caused the holes has been around since the early 1900s, after findings were published by American scientist William Clark. The cheese industry calls holes in the cheese eyes, and any cheese without eyes is called a blind cheese. So hopefully you learned something new. I know I certainly did. And it's not, one of these earth-shattering things of, like, now I'm going to be able to win Jeopardy. But, it's something interesting, right? It's something you can actually wind up, if your kids or your nephews or your cousins or, whatever, some, little small humans that aren't fully grown, if they ask, where's the holes in cheese come from? You can actually give them the right answer instead of saying, well, it's laser beams, blah, blah, blah. And apparently there was one site that I went to claiming that the holes in the cheese were cut in there a long time ago, and people would fill the holes with salt to smuggle salt in or out of somewhere. But no, that's not what happens at all. As the saying goes, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Speaking of not how things work, I've got another question. Question is, why the expletive do you waste so much time in the Libertarian Party if you're an anarchist? And let me first begin by saying, while I don't disavow the term anarchist, it's not one that I necessarily use to describe myself. As far as why do I, quote-unquote, waste time, well, that's going to require more time than what we have before the end of this segment, so stay tuned, and I'll tell you. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry, online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I'll get back to answering the question here in just a second. But since we are just before Turkey Gobble Day, which means we're just before Black Friday, which means we're just before Cyber Monday, well, have I got a deal for you? Yes, I do. Go to btcshop.fpp.cc. That's the Bitcoin store for Free Press publications. And yes, there are other altcoins that you can wind up using in the Bitcoin store. You can use Dash, you can use Monero, and several others. You can use Shapeshift, and anything that I don't accept directly, you can wind up using on your end. And not only are the prices already reduced and no added shipping, but write this down: BTC Friday 2016, all lowercase, BTC, as in Bitcoin, Friday, as in the day for Bitcoin Black Friday, BTC Friday 2016, all lowercase, and you will get an extra 20% off all orders over $10. And as always, no added shipping. BTC Friday 2016. Use that code at btcshop.fpp.cc. Back now to the questions. Why the blank do you waste time in the Libertarian Party if you're an anarchist? So I would say that it's not up to you to decide how I spend my time. So just because you would not spend your time doing something does not mean that I am wasting my time. Now, if the question is, why do I spend time in the Libertarian Party trying to get the Libertarian Party to actually advocate for libertarian ideals when I want government to go away? Well, that's another question, and that's a question I can actually ask. Because, see, there's two different types of people that want government to go away. And that's basically, the simple version of anarchist. Anarchist means no rulers. Somebody that does not want coercive government. So the two different types. There's the anarchists that realize that governments exist and they want to try to, reduce the amount of damage that governments do. And then there's the people that they want to live in a fantasy world to where they pretend that governments don't exist, and that if they just ignore the government, then they will not wind up going to jail for doing things that are illegal. Now, certainly, there are people in jail right now for things that had no victim. So, smoking a plant, possessing a plant, growing a plant, attempting to grow a plant, attempting to purchase a plant. There are people in jail for all of those things right now. They have harmed no one. But there are some people, well, if I just ignore the government will ignore me. No, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. So why would somebody that wants government to go away be involved in government-y sort of activities to try to minimize the risk? Now, let's imagine for a moment that we're jogging through Central Park. And I know for some of you it might be difficult to imagine jogging. For others it might be difficult to imagine being in New York City. But just play along. We're doing some kind of thing. We're walking down the sidewalk in Keene, New Hampshire. Although this analogy makes a hell of a lot more sense if it's New York City instead of Keene. So we're jogging through, or we're just walking through Central Park, and some guy jumps out from behind a tree, and he's got on a mask, and he points a gun, and he says, "Give me your money." Now, the anarchist that wants to pretend government doesn't exist would just, pretend the mugger guy doesn't exist and, try to walk away and probably wind up getting shot or, worse. The person that acknowledges, oh, yes, government exists, let me try to minimize the harm, might then tell the, mugger guy, I don't have any money on me, or I only have $10, when in fact, there's more than $10, or whatever, so they will try to reduce the harm that is happening in the moment. And the anarchist that wants to pretend that government doesn't exist would say that, by having a conversation with the mugger of saying, hey, don't rob me, I don't have any money, that somehow you are begging your masters for freedom. And we could, have a discussion all day long, and it's not going to change anybody's mind. The people that want to pretend government doesn't exist and then demonize people for trying to reduce harm on themselves and others, they are never going to be convinced that trying to reduce harm on themselves and others is beneficial. And the people that think that trying to minimize the harm done to themselves and others, they're never going to think that, pretending that government doesn't exist and just, la-di-da-di-da, I don't care what the rules are, never going to be convinced that that is the solution. And maybe neither of these things are the solution for getting governments to, stop throwing people in cages. But there's a hell of a lot more, evidence that you can look at of, hey, when people organize and put forth effort to doing certain things, then you can wind up reducing the harm of government. Let's look at California, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, now California, Massachusetts, and Maine, where voters in all of those states, and I think I missed one or two, have now voted to not throw people in jail for possessing a plant or growing a plant. Now, there are regulations on you can only grow so many plants, you can only possess so much of a plant, you can only have so many plants at a time. Now, hopefully those regulations all get thrown out at some point in the future. But there's a huge harm reduction in those places in one specific area. So there is evidence that, fighting against the system with the system does produce some sort of harm reduction and more liberty. Now, the next batch of questions, hopefully I will be able to get through completely. There's a lot of questions, and I can try to shorten my answers to some of these. Some will have to wind up being Turkey Day leftovers and getting tossed into the mix next Wednesday. So stay tuned. There's more on the Ask Me Anything episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Always online at fppradio.com.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
This is Paige Peterson from Made Safe, and you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Are you looking for a gift for yourself or a loved one? Well, how about the gift of precious metals? For nearly 40 years, people have been doing that. Well, for longer than 40 years, people have been giving the gift of precious metals. But for nearly 40 years, people have been going to Roberts & Roberts Brokerage as a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals. So let's say you've got, some silver that you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I think I want to, turn it into Bitcoin or turn it into, dollar bills. Call up Tim Fry at Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. 800-874-9760. And yes, they do take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases. And because they are Bitcoin preferred, they have removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. So call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit online at rrbi.co. That's RRBI, as in Roberts & Roberts Brokerage Incorporated, rrbi.co. back now into the questions. And again, it's a fairly lengthy series of questions that I will try to get the whole way through. No guarantees that I will. But again, if I don't, Thanksgiving leftovers get tossed over to next Wednesday. Question. Aren't farmers, and this is coming from someone who apparently is a farmer, he says, aren't farmers like myself also tax slaves? I believe I'm a tax slave. You said previously that we in the U.S. are all tax slaves, so reapers of all types must be too, right? And I guess what he means by reaper is the people that are actually, reaping the crops. And so it stands to reason that if, one group of people in the United States, and yes, I did previously say that everybody in the United States is a tax slave, that if everybody is X, then yes, a certain portion of X is also X. So yes, you're just as much a tax slave as, everybody else that is working to pay taxes. Now, I realize that there are some farmers, and I don't know specifically about this particular emailer, but there are some people that own farms that, they would not survive if it were not for tax subsidies. I think I remember seeing a couple years ago that Ted Turner, multi-millionaire, possibly billionaire, winds up getting millions of dollars every year in farm subsidies because he owns a bunch of land in Montana. So, we do have this weird sort of system that winds up hurting the little guy, if you will, and helping out people that should not be getting subsidies. And again, I don't think that anybody should be getting subsidies. But if you agree that, subsidies exist, I think we can all agree that, multimillionaires should not be getting tax subsidies. The next batch of questions or thoughts here begins. Much of our food is imported from places controlled by empire, and even food produced locally is often harvested by seasonal laborers that live below the poverty line under horrible conditions while being exposed to toxins. I feel that plants have equal, if not greater, rights than humans. But then my best friend is a tree, and I do grow and kill all of my own meat as much as possible. Eating meat and vegetables, as we do, is now wrong. All reasonable things, not just food, should be freely available, not for sale. Now, I can't say I necessarily agree with this, and here's why. Because if you say, and I realize that you're a farmer here saying this, but if you're saying that, everything should be free, so, plants should be free, that means that I have some kind of claim over somebody else's labor because they're putting time into growing, the corn or growing the whatever or, feeding these animals and growing to harvest. And I don't think that I have a legitimate claim on their labor, no more than they have a claim on mine. So I don't think I necessarily agree that, everything, including food, should be available for free and not for sale. The question here, when I hear libertarians speak, they often seem human-centric. Isn't it jerky to eat turkey? I raise those too. No, I don't see how it would be unless you're claiming that, and I'll get into this here because he kind of goes here, unless you're claiming that, humans don't need to eat anything. And he's not just saying, we shouldn't eat meat, but he does say that he eats it. He says, I eat food, but do not see it as being sustainable in any way, certainly not ethically. Should the libertarian principles extend to nature, plants, animals, the environment, etc.? Now, if you could, tell me how a tree can exercise their rights, then maybe I would, recognize the rights of a tree. I'll explain. Stay tuned.
Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison for operating the Silk Road. But that's not the end of the story. Ross is trying to get out, but he needs your help. The free Rossathon is happening Sunday, December 4th from 2 to 10 p.m. Eastern, featuring Roger Ver, Cody Wilson, Doug Casey, Tom Woods, and dozens of equally seditious speakers. Go to freeross.org right now and register for this free event. It's a fundraiser for Ross's appeal, so prepare to be inspired. freeross.org. That's freeross.org.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com.
Cell 411 is a free app for Android and iOS that replaces government-controlled 911. Cell 411 allows you to preset a group of friends or private organizations to show up in any emergency. Cell 411 is a nightmare for the state because it proves their so-called services aren't needed. Cell 411 has had thousands of installs, and of course it's covered by the BIPCOT no government license. Cell 411 because your friends won't shoot you when you're in trouble. Without the government, who would build the emergency services? You and Cell 411. Get it today at getcell411.com. That's getcell411.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
When libertarians speak, they often seem human-centric. Yes, we do. That's because, humans are really the only ones that have, as far as we know, have the ability to understand and comprehend things that are being said. I'm sure if I walked outside and talked to a tree, maybe the tree understands me. I seriously doubt it. But the question is, should libertarian principles be extended to nature, plants, animals, the environment, etc.? Now, I do think that libertarians should realize that while a dog might not have the same cognition as we do or the ability to express themselves, they can't verbalize what things necessary. Yeah, they can bark, but sometimes dogs bark because, oh, I'm happy. Sometimes dogs bark when they're angry. Sometimes they bark when they're hungry. So we don't understand necessarily what they're trying to say. So that's why when humans speak, we speak human-centric because that's what we understand. Now, do I think it's despicable and horrible for someone to go out and beat a dog or just, randomly chop down trees for no reason? Yes. Do I think that the tree has rights? No, because, there's not any way for the tree to exercise their rights. But humans do need to realize that, nature needs, or rather we need nature more than nature needs us. If humans cease to exist tomorrow, the planet would keep going. But if all of the trees cease to exist and all of the animals cease to exist, humans would cease to exist fairly shortly after. But, trees do this wonderful thing of turning carbon dioxide into oxygen, which is what we breathe. So, trees help us, animals help us, they provide us sustenance, etc. The next question, isn't any form of capitalism bound to violate rights of the non-human? And I would say that, capitalism under the original definition, which was a regulated economy in which the means of production were privately held, winds up violating human rights because the economy is being regulated. There are a lot more questions here that I will not be able to get into this week. Don't worry, though. They will be rolled over into the Thanksgiving leftover episode next Wednesday. And one of the questions, how many questions can one dude ask Darryl? I didn't count. I really did not count how many questions there were, but you can still send those in, ama@fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.